Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Chatting with the Experts TV show, where I speak with amazing women from Africa, from the Caribbean, and in the diaspora. These are professional women and successful entrepreneurial women. And they join me every week in spreading our mission, our joint mission, which is to educate women, empower women, and to inspire women globally. This week is no exception, and the topic today is living abroad, steps to establishing multiple residencies in the US and abroad. I'll tell you about my guest, Sabrina Brown. Well, she says, if you're curious about living abroad and interested in exploring your options to live outside the US, but not sure on how to formulate your plan and execute it, then she's the answer for your passport to international living. Sabrina is a 20-year real estate broker and realtor. She's an affiliate agent of ERA Live More, and she became a certified international property specialist, that's CIPS, in 2020 to assist internationals seeking to establish residence in the United States. Interestingly, she has seen increased interest from US citizens curious about living and buying property abroad. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. And with that, I always say this, my guests' bios are always so fabulous that I can't read everything. I'm going to invite Sabrina to join us on Chatting with the Experts. Today, as I said, we're going to be talking about living abroad and steps to establishing multiple residencies in the US and more. So tell us, how did you get into this? And why are you thinking of expanding your real estate work to a global landscape?
Yeah, really good question. I would say you highlighted a little bit how I flexed from welcoming internationals to the US to in reverse, where those were looking to expand their options. And we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, later in terms of what people are looking for abroad. But I will say that, so that was kind of coincidental that I started to assist people. But for myself, I have always viewed, and as well as my children, we've always viewed ourselves as global citizens. So there's always been a curiosity about our neighbors abroad. And I have hosted so many internationals, even in my home over the 10-year period. I've had like 13 people in a 10-year period who stayed with us. And just, it was very fascinating to learn about the different cultures. But I professionally, if that's the question, professionally how I got involved, I started to get questions about people looking at retirement options, people looking at just adventures. They knew that I knew a lot about countries and that I had connections and worked with a lot of different people. So it was coincidental that I started to get these questions about US citizens living abroad. And I never really thought about the model in that way. So I began to just go with it. I was privately pursuing it myself for all the reasons I had shared with you about my own curiosities, having a lens as a global citizen. And I had my target countries already. And I never really looked at it as really being of value. People are very scared when they go into these ventures. And oftentimes they talk about it, but they never have an action plan and definitely never actually act on it. So that's how it started. People started to ask me more and more questions, and I began to take my work seriously in that direction.
So I know in 2024, that's last year, you established, and you're going to have to, I don't know, CSBRAS, or is there, is it pronounced?
Oh, it's short for Sabrina Brown Realty and Advisory Services because it's a mouthful. So we say it's a mouthful. So we say SPRAS, right?
Okay.
Those who I work with, they know what SPRAS is, right? What is your question though about it?
So you established it in 2024 to do exactly what?
Well, 2024, we began to do two things. One, we started to establish tours abroad to take people to have what we call a soft landing. A lot of times folks have culture shock when they make these leaps. And so if you have someone who can shepherd you through that process, it just makes it a lot feasible for many, and they're able to get more clarity about what they want. And then the second thing is one-on-one consultation. And of course, this year now we're going to do a webinar, which again we can chat a little bit about just to kind of expose people to some of these concepts in a little bit detail. But those are the two things, is really starting to develop tours, group tours, to bring people where they can kind of get a quick injection, have fun. We don't want it to be like being on a bus. Those can be kind of boring, but something that's fun, engaging. You feel like you are a local there, and yet you're getting infused with a lot of information along the way without often realizing how much you're learning. And then the one-on-ones where we sit with clients working on their action plan. What do they want? The globe is a lot to digest. It's intimidating for many people. So how do we align their goals to exactly what they want for themselves and the opportunities? And not only that, for them, their families too. They're not always thinking of just themselves.
So what are some of the common reasons you're here? And because I know there's a heightened interest, and because you've been doing Sabras. Is it Sabras?
Sabrina Brown Realty. We keep it for short today.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So what are some of the common reasons you're here and now with people wanting to live abroad?
Well, certainly my perspective is going to be from the US. Let me just say that. But
right.
This is nothing unique in terms of looking at these options abroad. There are numbers of contacts that I have, particularly for those who want to gain citizenship. There are other countries that have been tapping into that, but the US and Canada usually have been the largest market share of this type of market. And to be frank with you, many want options for themselves. Okay, they want options. And we can't deny that some are a little uncomfortable with what they're seeing. And one can debate about the US unrest, but let's face it, it's not just the US only. There's a movement around the world. There's more of a focus on nationalism today, where the borders are becoming a little tighter. It's not just a US thing that you're hearing on the TV. So with that said, what would travel look like for someone who wants to have a long stay? Or if someone decides that, you know what, gosh, my 401k got really hit hard. I might want to do something and diversify, and maybe in my golden years want to stay somewhere a little bit longer. And thirdly, the misnomer or the misunderstanding about the 180-day visa for those who live in the US. You would be shocked that folks think, well, I'll just use my tourist visa because I can go anywhere in the good portion of the country and I'll just go as a tourist. My friend, that is probably one thing. If anybody is thinking of that and you have thought about trying to live abroad for various reasons, I want to tell you to pause right now. That is not a guarantee. Let me give you an example. Mexico, which is so close to me and literally geographically close to us, those in the US, someone had decided, oh, I'll just rent 90 days in Mexico, signed a lease for 90 days. Got to the border and the immigration officer stamped her passport for 30 days only. She said, wait a minute, I thought I had 188 days. Oh, you're at the wishes of the immigration officer.
Yes.
Not everyone, this is not some hardcore, this has been kind of a shaking of hands. This is not somewhere where you go to your embassy and they're going to argue for you and you're going to get your 180 days back. And no one's going to have a fight for you in that. And particularly with the climate changing, being able to go through the formal process in these various governments of your choice, where you see yourself staying an extended amount of time, it is an investment for yourself because nothing's guaranteed. Also, even in Europe, the same thing. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Schengen zone, the Schengen area. This is a zone, for those who are not familiar with it. It's where there are 27 European countries and they're borderless. If you are an EU resident, European Community resident, you are able to work and stay in any of the countries that's in the EU without a time limit. Okay, so here's now the US who says, I have my 180 days. Okay, this is how that works in practice. You have to be out, you have 90 days of your 180 days. You see how it's up for interpretation? Okay, you have 90
Say
days.
that again.
Sorry again?
Say that again. You have 90 days.
So you can only spend 90 days
Mhm.
total within 180 days. Because what people do is they border hop. Okay, I'll get out. I'll go somewhere. I'll get out of the zone and I'll come
Mhm.
back. No, they're from the time you will depart to the time, beginning to end, you have 100, and you can only stay in that zone in the EU for 90 days over a
Ah,
180-day period. So it takes into account your border hopping. Okay. So, and if you violate that, it is quite severe. Not only fines, penalties, you may be banned from traveling to the EU in the future. So it does pay to really spend time to study these countries' immigration laws. If you're serious about it, to engage the right way. And I'm happy to talk. I don't want to jump too far ahead because I get a little excited about this stuff.
no, please talk. I mean, we want to
But
learn. That's why we're here.
what I'm saying is that there are just so many ways to slice this as to, how people might go about that. But I guess to suffice it to say is that for now is that there's assuming that the 180-day tourist visa that many of us have relied on freely in the past, that is not a guarantee. And trust me, with things becoming a little bit more tighter at the borders, even if you want to enjoy extended stays, even if you have no interest to become a citizen in these places or permanent residents in these places, the freedom to move about, to have options to be a digital nomad, which means you work in another country if you have an online job. But guess what? Sometimes you may choose to be in a country that has a lower cost of living. Those are, again, going back to your initial question, these are the reasons why someone might want to go abroad. They're saving money and still making US dollars. They stretch their budgets that way. They're able to have a better quality of life in the end. But you cannot assume that the tourist visa will be able to do the trick in the end.
So what I'm hearing from you is that we need to do a lot of research. COVID kind of lowered a lot of that border. We just felt okay with COVID, especially the younger. My sister says don't say young because we're still young. They're younger
Yes, I like that.
Yes, a lot of them looked into that and continued even after COVID to, be digital nomads. They were US citizens, but they're living in Mexico, they're living somewhere in Europe, they're in Australia,
Yes,
but working for US-based companies, or even,
yes.
non-US based companies being paid in US dollars. And, for them, well, that was just a new way of living. You were saying, in other words, one needs to do some more, do some in-depth research on where you want to be a digital nomad at and find out the laws of the country there,
Yes.
not assume.
And they can change at any time. So I'm interested in that we use kind of that starting point, digital nomad. Two things I want to just kind of dispel some misunderstandings. During COVID, yes, there was a time, and it's hard to really track exactly when, where some countries were lowering or made it easier for expats, we call them, expatriates, to come
Yeah.
over to different countries to work remotely. But there were others who, let's say, they actually had houses and they had done the border hop with their 180 days tourist visa for a long time. They came back because of COVID and they could not return to their real home of residence. So let's say in Panama, they would hop over to Costa Rica and then they would, or Nicaragua, if they in Costa Rica, and they would border hop basically to these and then go right back to their place of residence. They couldn't get back to those countries because they had shut them down. They had never gotten their visa. Some of them were working off of, in the case of the digital visa, where they actually made an application, then it does depend on which country. But by and large, it wasn't a guarantee even during those times. So what I'm saying the takeaway is, and the point is, don't rely on the loose way of doing things. You do want to follow the formal process to control your destiny as much as you can.
You do want to follow the formal process. Yes, that's a really good point. Really good point.
Mhm.
So as we're still talking about, living abroad, exploring multiple residencies, are there lists of countries, because that's the question I heard, are there lists of countries that are welcoming Americans to their homeland?
Certainly, this is the biggest piece to, and when you think of welcoming, let's talk about what that really means. It does depend on, your goal. Okay, so if your goal is I want to just get a baseline temporary residency for now, which may last a few years. Sometimes it could be as early as 6 months in some places to years. Mexico, for instance, has up to 4 years of temporary residency, and then you become eligible for permanent status. Most of them have, and that's what I am referring to just now, and that's what I want to point out is the naturalization process, is that's just one category. The second category I want to share with you, and it just goes back to answer your question, it goes back to what your goals are. If you want to be one and done and take care of your family, give options, maybe it's security, maybe you're kind of uneasy with the political climates or whatever you're seeing and whatever that might mean to you, and you just want to control that and have an option for your family, then some people are also applying for what's called citizenship by investment. Okay, also known as a more relaxed version. And there's so many tiers to this. To try to talk about immigration laws in 1 hour is a mouthful, but that's why we do tend to kind of do one-on-ones. But just to give you a flavor of it, these citizenship by investments, one and done, this is fast track to residency. And these are places like Dominica. These are places like Antigua and Barbuda. A lot of those in the Caribbean, St. Vincent, they offer these fast tracks. In 3 months, you can have citizenship. Now, here's the catch. The catch is that they require a pretty steep investment. Now, these were not only meant to be the easiest. When you say welcoming, they were very welcoming. If you had, this is for high net worth buyers who can plop down maybe $100,000 and get this. And again, I'm not judging, I'm just giving it out because some people have the means to do it. And I just don't blame them for being one and done. If you want to be close to mainland US, again, that's part of your decision set, how far you want to go. But for that one, they were very attractive and very welcoming because it only at one point took $100,000. And then last year, there was a huge demand. It spiked. And all of them came together and decided to increase it to 200 to 250,000 entry point for that.
And that's US dollars.
US dollars, I'm speaking in. And you can accomplish this through donations to the government itself. You can accomplish this through, and sometimes they may have a slightly, if you do a straight donation, then it could be a slightly lower level, but there's still, it's healthy 6 figures. And this is before you actually get your government sponsor provider that has to shepherd you through that level of the process. And we could talk about, but suffice it to say, you're looking at several $100,000 and you and a family of 4 can have all residencies, and it depends on which of those countries, up to age 25. Some will tap out at 18 and 25. But if you have a toddler and you have means, you might find, oh my gosh, this is well over a decade for my children to have absolute unfettered access to this country. And then here's the other thing too. So that's one tier. Okay, so let me just point that out. Then there's another one, and keep me on track in case sometimes I go down in a hole on some of this stuff. So I know you'll keep me, Paul, on track. So the other one is golden visas. Now, we've probably heard of golden visas, maybe in just in your casual, those who find an interest in this. Now, some of them can lead to citizenship, like I mentioned, certainly. But a lot of folks want to do it because it's easy access to get their residency. They don't have to do, like, for instance, like I did it the slow way. I did 1 step, temporary residency, go back, renew, step 2, doing that process. Then after that, permanent residency, right? They're going straight. And you see a lot of the European countries. So you have Spain, Portugal, Italy, a lot of those are going to offer these golden visas. Or coincidentally, Spain actually is going to retract its golden visa. And we'll talk about why they're doing that in a minute, because there's a little controversy with some of these because there are privileges associated with it. But these are the residencies that allow you still to invest and your own home, though, which is good. So now, unlike in the Caribbean, where you had to either give the government money or you had to invest in a real estate that's sponsored by one of their government-sponsored providers, which you could stay in the real estate property, but you only have 2 weeks. Now, they sell it as, oh, this income, you get X percentage of return. The reality is you only can stay there for 2 weeks. The rest of the time, it's just a vehicle for them to use your money to help build up their economy, which is not a bad thing if it meets your goals, but that's just one segment. So back to golden visa, now most commonly used in Europe. Those allow you within sometimes weeks. Now, Portugal, many people have been very curious about Portugal. Okay, that was, I have to tell you, was not always an easy way to get to Portugal. Now, Portugal allows you to buy a residency of your own choice. And if you're going to live there, you're like, that's a win. Okay, a real estate investment, or you can have a business. And there are so many other qualifications or categories to gain access. And now you can have this accomplished in a matter of weeks, not years, in their
That's
golden
for
days
Portugal?
for Portugal. This
Wow.
changed just last year, but it was not an easy when people kept talking about Portugal, Portugal. And I'm like, guys, you don't realize that this is a very hard country until recently. They see the opportunity, they've loosened up their requirements. Now, here's the catch. There's always a catch to some of these. And this is only, again, giving you strategy number 2 as a point of reference for you to watch out for when you are examining these countries. And it is stay requirements. The reason why folks were talking about Portugal, but I knew there was no way that most people could ever access Portugal because there's stay requirements. Yes, you could invest in it. Yes, you can get the golden visa, but you have to stay there 6 months every year. I mean, that's virtually retired for most people. Who can do
Yes.
that? Now, just last year they updated and you only have to touch down once a year every 7 days. Okay, now that's in play for a lot of people.
Okay,
Okay.
wait, go back on that. You have to go there once every 7 days. Is that what you said?
You have to stay 7. Okay, we call it stay requirement. So when
Okay.
you are analyzing these countries, the question you should be asking yourself is not just the entry point or what the headlines might say, oh, easy to come here. What I found welcoming is that can I feasibly be there? I still work. I can't
Right.
be, I'm still transacting as a broker in the US. I can't stay anywhere for 6 months at a time. I would have abandoned my business physically.
Yes. Yes.
So what I study is, and the reason why was attracted to Mexico and Panama is because the stay requirements were minimal.
Ah,
Okay.
gotcha now.
And so the stay requirements for Portugal has loosened up. Now they're 7 days a year. And then you still can progress to your track to permanent residency. Now, again, the other thing
I'm
that's,
writing.
I'm sorry.
No, you see me looking to the side because I'm taking notes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no
I'm
problem, no
writing.
problem. And so the
Mhm.
other thing you want to think about too is as you progress, because at some point you're going to get tired of doing these applications and renewals.
Mhm.
So you got to find out what's my terminal, what's my endpoint. If in fact, let's just say hypothetically, you want to be a citizen, then you got to think about, oh my gosh, what are the language requirements? You do realize in those countries, they want you to speak the language functionally, a
Yes.
working knowledge. No offense, but I have no interest to learn Portuguese. I'm struggling enough for Spanish. I am a
Yeah, very
survivor
similar.
Spanish speaker. I can get the job done, but I'm just saying you have to be mindful of that. And that's that. So then, do I really want citizenship? Am I okay with permanent residency? I don't need to have to vote. I have all the other benefits of being a resident there, but I can't vote. I can't serve in the military. I can't do these things, but I have access to the healthcare system, and that may be good enough for you, depending on your goals. Again, so when we say which countries are welcoming, it really comes with a big asterisk. Well, what do you mean by that? Do you mean that in terms of the affordability? Do I mean in terms of security? And so affordability, another one, if anyone has any interest in, for instance, Asia, I mean, Thailand is extremely cheap. It doesn't really cost that much. I mean, you have $20,000 US dollars to,
Only.
yeah, for Thailand to get started, to invest in the country. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's not like I'm wired because I'm in real estate. Everything has to be an investment for me, right? Because that's just how
Yeah, I
I'm
agree.
wired. So for me to just donate something to a government is a mind shift, but you also have to say to yourself, maybe investment is different than, for instance, how I'm defining it. I'm looking at assets. Maybe my investment is freedom. My investment is to have options for my family. And some of them will take you and your family. Some of them will limit, for instance, when I was looking at some of the Antigua and Barbuda in the Caribbean, like they will require, oh yeah, I'll take you, but then like your 25-year-old adult son, he has to have his own application. Well, where he's going to get at the time it was $100,000. Where are you going to get $100,000 to give to a government? No
Yeah,
way.
okay.
He would, or I'm not going to foot it, the bill for him.
But talking about Bermuda, let me ask you. So is what you're saying is that they will accept you as a family as long as your children are under a certain age. After that,
Correct.
then
Correct. And
they are independent investors.
correct. So that's your
Wow.
biggest bang for the buck. That is your
Mhm.
biggest bang. Maybe this might the application a nominal fee, but you don't get treated like an individual applicant if your children are under 25. They take you
Mhm.
plus a family of four is how they call it.
Okay.
So really good, value there. But yes, after that, they would have to be their own. After 20, when they reach 25, then they have to apply themselves. So yeah.
Ooh.
So you, as the parent, you have citizenship. but the kids, and I knew that too. So in Panama, actually, I have permanent residency in Panama. And so we can also talk about, if you like, how that works too. There's another classification. So now you can buy your way through. Okay. You can invest in the government, in the local real estate, or have a business demonstrate. Same thing with Canada, actually. You can start a business. People think that Canada is a hard one because people are like, oh, you know what, for everything, I'll just go to Canada. Oh, my friend, that is not as easy as one might think.
That's an eye opener. I thought it was just, we're neighbors. So, hey.
Oh, no. And particularly now with all the tension that's going on, it's even, but they're just, if anything, anyone, if I impress upon you, is like, can I do this? Absolutely. Is this across the board uniform? No, it is not. It's very intricate. You have to know which classification. Just like we have so many different, work visas, investment, the EB-5 in the US was, obviously that's being replaced or talked about being replaced, but that's in the US when you, similarly, same thing, I would used to put $1 million and demonstrate that I have going to produce jobs in the US, and all those that would come abroad, they would get residency for themselves and their children so they can go to school and have the same luxuries, right? So what these countries are asking is no different than we've asked of them. So when you look at, again, Canada is not as easy as it may seem. You have to be sponsored basically by a province. Okay, that's what, if you don't have, and this goes to another classification, is by descent. If you have a descent, or my husband is Jamaican, so my kids are eligible for citizenship by descent. I am eligible for citizenship by marriage, for instance. So there's that. But going back to Canada, you can, and we were talking about job creation. So you can demonstrate that to a country. Same thing from Europe and same thing with Canada. And that's also probably the easier access to get into Canada is if you legitimately have, and it has to be well documented, we can talk about that later. But the bottom line is that there are many ways to cut at that. But by and large, because they're neighbors, they're not easy. They're not easy to get into. They're pretty darn strict, in fact. So if you're not looking at these golden visas that we were talking about in Europe to stay focused, then the other way that people, when I was leading into topic-wise before we sidebar in Canada, was that there are these other statuses of what's called economic solvency. You like country XYZ. I'm not here to work. I'm not here to take any jobs away. I basically want to go through your naturalization process. I want to hang out, and I'm going to show you I'm not going to take any jobs. I have my own income. I have my pension. I have my own income here. I'm going to show you I have the means to provide and, frankly, help your economy by being a consumer. I just want to stay in return for that. And that is, now to go back to your larger question, what is more welcoming? Now we have a lot of the Latin countries. You can go up down that board. You got now Panama, you got Mexico, you have Costa Rica, you have all down that whole corridor. It's a lot more welcoming if you understand that's my entree to get in there to show. They call them, in because it's Spanish speaking countries, they call it the pensionata. Most of them have the same language. I'm looking for the pensionata visa. The pensionata would be a track for you in order to get that type of admission to the country.
You know what, Sabrina? We could talk forever. You've got a wealth of information. And so I know so many people have joined and they want to ask you questions. There are two things I'm going to ask you to do.
Yeah, please put in the chat about my seminar coming up. That we
yes,
can talk
that's
more
what I was
about
going to say. I want everyone to know that Sabrina is available. She's going to be having a seminar coming up soon. I'm going to put a link in the chat.
May 3rd. It'll be May 3rd, correct.
It's on May 3rd.
Yep.
At what time?
I believe it's at 10 to 11:30, but don't trust me. Please, Eastern time. Please look at the invitation. I don't want to misquote. It's on my calendar is all I know. I don't handle that. I have a helper. But yes, May 3rd.
All right. Yes, it is May 3rd. I'm looking at it right now. It's from 11 to 12:30 EDT. Okay, and it's virtual, of course.
Yes, virtual.
Yes.
And that will help someone to formulate their action plan. It's not the same as a one-on-one, but it's a good start to kind of really think about the things that are important to you on this topic.
Okay, all right. So now we know about the event that's coming up on May 3rd. For those who are going to be looking at this because it's being recorded, how can they get in touch with you in general? If they miss the May 3rd, not that we want them to, but how can they get in touch with you? I'm sure you have a website.
Absolutely. So I mean, my information is all in the public domain because I'm a real estate broker. So if you want to write me personally, it's Sabrina, Sabrina, and you can put it in the chat at sbrbrokers.com. And sbrbrokers.com is the domain. And certainly if you just want to, it's more general stuff about me. Some things Paula spoke about today about my profile will be on there, my team. But I think just directly, if you want to gain access, sbrbrokers.com, Sabrina at sbrbrokers.com is my email address.
Okay, I'll put that in. Yes.
Yep.
Are you on LinkedIn?
I am, but you know how I am. I'm challenged, Paula. You have to ask my assistant. He manages all that. I have to focus on just client work. I don't handle a lot of that, but we will put that in I think he had shared that with you, that link too. He did. You can, if you don't mind putting, yes, I am on LinkedIn.
Okay, you're on LinkedIn and you're on Facebook.
I was afraid you're going to ask me for my handle or something. I don't have that.
A lot of that can be pulled from your website. I'll put this in the chat.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Sure. And of course, I say to everyone, if you have enjoyed what you just heard, who wouldn't? And you'd like to be a guest on the show, please reach out to me on my website. It's chattingwiththeexperts.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well as Paula Kone. I also am on Instagram, and my handle there, I struggle with that handle too. Always have to think about it, is at chat_experts_podcast. And I am also on Facebook as Paula Okune, and I have my business page now, which is Chatting with the Experts. Last but not least, we have a YouTube channel. Please reach out to us there as well. And whenever we do these shows, we put them out on an audio podcast. It's on YouTube and it's on all the other audio directories, and of course, Spotify. Now, Sabrina, you've told us a wealth of information, but what I'm going to do is open up the floor so that everyone who joined us will have an opportunity to speak with you, because, oh my gosh, we could be here for 2 hours and not get bored. And that's what your webinar is all about. For an hour, they can ask you a lot of questions that you were able to touch on today, but of course you couldn't do everything. So we will open up the floor now to everyone who joined. Thank you again, Sabrina.
You're welcome.